Imagine a world without cities, electricity, cell phones, or the internet. A frozen planet, ruled by wild predators, brutal storms, and nearly untouched landscapes. In this setting, the Neanderthal extinct cousins fought one of the most epic battles in human history, the struggle for survival. But who were they? How did they manage to endure the harshest conditions of the Ice Age? And why did they vanish while we, Homo sapiens, went on? In this video, we'll travel back 50,000 years to uncover the secrets of Neanderthal resilience and discover what their lives can still teach us about adaptation, perseverance, and evolution. Neanderthals weren't just simple cavemen as many imagine. They were a human species with large brains, a distinct culture, and remarkable abilities. They lived in Europe, parts of Asia, and the Middle East, and ruled the continent for thousands of years before Homo sapiens arrived. These archaic humans had strong bodies, short legs, and broad chests, a true biological machine, built to endure the biting cold of the Ice Age. Natural hunters, skilled toolmakers, and possibly even artists, they left behind mysterious marks in caves and fossils, revealing a level of intelligence that still fascinates scientists today. Studying how Neanderthals survived is more than just a journey through time, it's a window into what it means to be human. They faced extreme environmental challenges, hunted mammoths with stone spears, cared for their sick, and buried their dead with respect. In other words, they weren't just survivors, they were social, empathetic, and complex beings. Understanding their daily lives, their fears, their strategies, and even their failures can help us uncover how we ourselves evolved. And more importantly, why did we manage to move forward while they vanished? Was it luck, adaptation, or a mix of both? 50,000 years ago, Earth was a radically different place. The planet was in the grip of the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of the northern hemisphere. Giant animals like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and saber-toothed tigers roamed the land. Days were short, nights were freezing, and a single mistake could mean death. The humans of that time had no sewn clothing or brick houses. Everything was improvised from hides, bones, stones, and wood. Yet amid the icy chaos, Neanderthals built communities, developed sophisticated stone tools, and found ways to live and survive in an almost impossible world. If today a cold snap sends us running for a blanket, imagine living in a world where winter was eternal, the wind cut like a blade, and food was scarce. Welcome to the Paleolithic time, when the planet itself seemed to test the very limits of human life. In this brutal landscape, Neanderthals didn't just survive, they thrived. But how? What challenges did they face? And what does the environment reveal about the strength and intelligence of this remarkable species? At the height of the Ice Age, temperatures in some parts of Europe frequently dropped below -20 degrees Celsius. Vegetation was sparse, buried under snow and ice, and food was constantly on the move or hidden beneath the frozen ground. Violent storms, relentless blizzards, and endless nights were part of daily life. It was like living in a natural freezer where even breathing could hurt. And summers? Short, damp, and barely a relief. It was a world with no room for mistakes. If you weren't prepared, you wouldn't survive the next season. Despite the harsh climate, Neanderthals spread across an impressive range. Their fossils have been found from the Iberian Peninsula to the Middle East, in regions like France, Germany, Russia, Israel, and even parts of Uzbekistan. They sought natural shelters, such as caves and cliff crevices, and set up temporary camps as they followed herds of migrating animals. Each group adapted to its local environment: dense forests, arid plains, or ice-covered valleys. Wherever there was life, they found a way to live too. The Neanderthal body was their primary armor against the elements. They had broad noses that helped warm the air before it reached their lungs, and wide chests with larger lungs perfect for enduring the cold and higher altitudes. Their arms and legs were short and muscular, which helped conserve body heat and provided strength for navigating rugged terrain. Their skin was likely lighter, aiding in vitamin D absorption in regions with limited sunlight, and their bones? Thick and dense, built to withstand falls, dangerous hunts, and freezing nights. They were true human tanks shaped by nature to endure the impossible. In a world where the cold could kill in hours and giant predators lurked in the darkness, finding shelter wasn't a luxury, it was a matter of life and death. The Neanderthals knew this well, and it was this constant need for protection that turned them into survival experts when it came to setting up camp. They didn't have brick houses or cozy cabins, but what they lacked in comfort, they made up for in ingenuity. They learned to turn caves, branches, stones, and fire into fortresses against the wild. For Neanderthals, Caves were far more than holes in the rock. They were natural fortresses. They offered protection from wind, snow, rain, and of course the hungry beasts that prowled at night. But they didn't settle in just any cave. They chose spots with good ventilation, easy access to water, and preferably a panoramic view of the surrounding terrain. Some caves were used so effectively that they became long-term homes, revealing fossils, tools, and even traces of campfires still preserved today. These caves also helped maintain a more stable temperature, acting as natural thermal homes. In the heart of an Ice Age winter, that could mean the difference between life and death. Caves weren't always nearby, and when that was the case, Neanderthals improvised. They set up outdoor camps using whatever materials they had on hand: large stones for walls, branches for structure, and animal hides for cover. Some excavations have revealed circular structures made from mammoth bones and other giant animal remains. These were true prehistoric igloos, used as temporary shelters during migrations or extended hunts. These camps show that Neanderthals had a sense of planning and organization. They knew where to sleep, where to build fires, where to store tools, and even where to discard food scraps to keep predators away. Fire was the heart of the Neanderthal shelter. It didn't just warm the space it cooked food, kept wild animals at bay, and lit up the pitch-black nights without moonlight. Mastering fire was a game-changer. Neanderthals knew how to keep a fire going for days, using techniques like carefully stacking embers and covering them with ash, and more. Studies suggest they even had designated spots for fires within their caves, showing their organization was more advanced than once thought. More than a tool, fire was a symbol of connection. Around the flames, they shared meals, tended to the injured, and perhaps even told stories, maybe the first whispers of what we would one day call culture. Eating wasn't just a necessity, it was a triumph. In a wild, frozen world, finding food meant tracking massive prey, facing life-or-death dangers, and sharing every bite with the group. For Neanderthals, eating was a raw art, a game of strategy and survival. And it wasn't just raw meat and bones. The Neanderthal diet was more varied and surprising than many might think. The way they fed themselves reveals a lot about their intelligence, teamwork, and even the more sensitive side of their species. Neanderthals were carnivores out of necessity. In cold regions with sparse vegetation, meat was their main source of energy. They hunted large animals like reindeer, wild horses, bison, and even mammoths, massive creatures that required teamwork and immense bravery to bring down. And they wasted nothing. They used the meat, bone marrow, internal organs, and even the fat, which was vital for surviving the cold. Some fossil evidence even suggests they may have practiced cannibalism in extreme situations, a topic that still sparks debate among archaeologists. Hunting alone was a death sentence. That's why Neanderthals hunted in groups using coordinated tactics. They would surround animals, drive them toward cliffs, or funnel them into rough terrain where they became more vulnerable. There's evidence of pits dug into the ground and even ambushes, revealing a remarkable ability to plan and communicate for a species without written language. During these hunts, every group member had a role, from scouts to those lying in wait to strike at just the right moment. It was a true dance of survival, where success depended on perfect timing and teamwork. But Neanderthals didn't live on meat alone. Recent dental tartar analyses have revealed something surprising. They also ate plants. Roots, wild berries, seeds, and even cooked grains were part of their diet, especially in regions with milder climates. This shows they knew how to adapt their diet to their environment and had knowledge of what was edible versus what was poisonous. Some researchers even suggest they cooked bitter roots to make them more digestible, surprisingly sophisticated behavior for the time. Neanderthals were masters of weapon making. They used sharpened wooden spears, carefully fitted stone points, and scrapers to strip meat from bones. The tools of the so-called Mousterian culture reveal an impressive mastery of stone technology. There's also evidence they used natural adhesives, like tree resin, to attach stone tips to wooden shafts, essentially prehistoric glue. Their blades were also precisely sharpened for different tasks: cutting meat, scraping hides, or piercing bone. If Neanderthals had a signature, it would be etched in stone, literally. Long before the invention of writing or agriculture, they had already mastered their own form of technology, a quiet revolution built on flake stone, raw wood, and sharpened bone. And the most remarkable part? They did it all without instructions, tutorials, or templates, just through observation, trial and error, and a keen sense of adaptation, sharp as their blades. In such a hostile world, technology wasn't a luxury, it was the line between life and death. The name might sound complex, but Mousterian culture is one of the greatest legacies of the Neanderthals. Named after the archaeological site of Le Moustier in France, this culture marks a true leap in toolmaking. They didn't just break stones, they planned every flake, They used a technique called the Levallois method, where they shaped the stone's core with incredible precision to strike off a ready-made blade with a single blow. This shows that Neanderthals thought ahead. They designed their tools before they even made them. Such sophistication points to something even deeper. They had memory, logic, and manual skill on the level of true craftsmen. Each tool had a specific purpose. Spear points were used to pierce large prey. Scrapers cleaned animal hides. Blades were used to cut meat or shape wood. And all were crafted with a level of precision that still impresses today. What's more, they knew how to adapt the shape of the stone to the intended using a finer point for piercing, a curved blade for slicing all made by hand, without machines or molds, just sharp eyes and skilled hands. Some tools even show signs of heavy use and repair, indicating they valued and reused their gear, treating these tools almost like extensions of their own bodies. To craft all of this, Neanderthals used what the environment provided. Stone was their primary material, especially flint, a hard rock that could be flaked with precision. But they also used large bones as hammers and wood to make spear shafts and tool handles. What's fascinating is how deliberately they chose these materials. For instance, wood-strong yet flexible was a favorite for making spears. Long bones from large animals were turned into levers, scrapers, or even digging tools. Even without metal, wheels, or writing, Neanderthals proved that technology doesn't rely on electricity, it thrives on ingenuity. And in that, they were far more advanced than most people realize. Long before the first cities, religions, or governments, Neanderthals had something fundamental: a sense of community. They didn't live as isolated individuals, but as tightly knit groups bound by survival, affection, and cooperation. And despite the lingering stereotype of the cave brute, the traces they left behind reveal a species far more sensitive, compassionate, and intelligent than once believed. When we take a closer look, we begin to see that Neanderthals had a culture of their own, and perhaps even the earliest roots of what would one day become our humanity. Alone, a Neanderthal wouldn't last long. Survival depended on being part of a group for hunting, protection, warmth, and care. Living collectively wasn't the exception, it was the rule. And that may have been one of the species' greatest strengths. These groups likely ranged from 10 to 30 members, often composed of extended families. Together, they traveled long distances, shared food, and looked after the most vulnerable. Unity was, quite literally, what kept them alive amid nature's chaos. And more. Living in such close quarters likely forged deep emotional bonds, perhaps even deeper than we imagine. Neanderthals had sexual relationships primarily for reproduction, of course, but evidence suggests there may have been some form of partner selection, perhaps based on appearance, strength, or social standing within the group. While there are no direct records of romance or anything resembling marriage, genetic studies offer some intriguing insights. For instance, Neanderthals avoided inbreeding between siblings or between parents and offspring, suggesting a social taboo against incest. Often chose partners from outside their own group, implying interclan exchanges, something that also helped promote genetic diversity. Nothing worked without collaboration. Neanderthals practiced a division of labor based on age, strength, and experience. The strongest hunted, the most skilled crafted tools, the elders offered guidance, and children learned by watching everything up close. This cooperation wasn't random, it was strategic. Excavations have revealed evidence that even the injured or disabled remained part of the group and received care. This suggests they valued each individual and understood the power of caring for one another. In a world where any mistake could be fatal, teamwork was the greatest technology they had. Did Neanderthals speak? It's one of science's most intriguing questions. And while the answer remains partially shrouded in mystery, the likely conclusion is Yizor, something very close to it. Fossils show they had a hyoid bone critical for supporting the muscles used in speech, very similar to that of modern humans. Additionally, their brains had well-developed regions associated with language. So, while they probably didn't give speeches, they likely used sounds, gestures, facial expressions, and vocal tones to communicate. Imagine that. Meaningful grunts, glances that conveyed entire thoughts, and maybe even coordinated signals during hunts. This suggests that their communication went far beyond instinct. It involved intention, emotion, and memory. This may be one of the most moving aspects of Neanderthal life. They cared for one another. Fossils have been found of individuals who lived for years with broken bones, missing teeth, or severe deformities, conditions only survivable with group support. There were Neanderthals blind in one eye, limping on a leg, or missing an arm, yet they lived on for a long time. This shows they didn't abandon the weak, they protected, fed, and sheltered those in need. Such care for the sick and elderly suggests a level of empathy and solidarity once thought to be exclusive to Homo sapiens. But no Neanderthals, even without temples or texts, already practiced something very close to compassion. When we think of spirituality, we often picture temples, organized beliefs, and elaborate rituals. But what if I told you that the seed of human spirituality may have sprouted long before writing deep in a Neanderthal cave? Even without formal religion, Neanderthals left signs that they may have already contemplated death, the afterlife, and the meaning of existence. In a world where danger was constant, perhaps taking the time to bury a loved one was humanity's very first act of faith. At several archaeological sites, Neanderthal bodies have been found buried in fetal positions, surrounded by tools, food remains, or even fossilized flowers. One of the most famous examples comes from Shanidar in present-day Iraq, where a Neanderthal was buried with traces of flower pollen, something many archaeologists interpret as a symbolic or ritual gesture. These burials show that they didn't simply dispose of the dead. They paused, dug, chose specific locations, and prepared the spaces to ensure a respectful passage for those who had passed. And that changes everything, because burying someone requires more than technique. It requires memory, emotion, and perhaps belief. If Neanderthals buried their dead, could they have believed in something beyond life? We can't say for certain, but their symbolic gestures offer strong clues. They may have seen death not as a definitive end, but as a transition. Perhaps they believed in spirits, some kind of invisible force, or simply wished to keep their dead close. In any case, their care and burial practices reveal something profound. Neanderthals had deep emotions, and that connects us to them in a surprising way. After all, what makes us human if not the ability to grieve, to remember, and to honor those who are gone? For a long time, it was believed that only Homo sapiens created cave art, but recent discoveries have challenged that idea. In caves across Spain, paintings have been found dating back over 60,000 years before Homo sapiens ever arrived in the region. These markings, dots, lines, negative handprints may have been made by Neanderthals. If that's true, it changes everything. It shows they didn't just hunt and survive, they thought, felt, and created. At several archaeological sites, Neanderthal bodies have been found buried in fetal positions, surrounded by tools, food remains, or even fossilized flowers. One of the most famous examples comes from Shanidar in present-day Iraq, where a Neanderthal was buried with traces of flower pollen, something many archaeologists interpret as a symbolic or ritual gesture. These burials show that they didn't simply dispose of the dead. They paused, dug, chose specific locations, and prepared the spaces to ensure a respectful passage for those who had passed. And that changes everything, because burying someone requires more than technique. It requires memory, emotion, and perhaps belief. If Neanderthals buried their dead, could they have believed in something beyond life? We can't say for certain, but their symbolic gestures offer strong clues. They may have seen death not as a definitive end, but as a transition. Perhaps they believed in spirits, some kind of invisible force, or simply wished to keep their dead close. In any case, their care and burial practices reveal something profound. Neanderthals had deep emotions, and that connects us to them in a surprising way. After all, what makes us human if not the ability to grieve, to remember, and to honor those who are gone? For a long time, it was believed that only Homo sapiens created cave art, but recent discoveries have challenged that idea. In caves across Spain, paintings have been found dating back over 60,000 years before Homo sapiens ever arrived in the region. These markings, dots, lines, negative handprints may have been made by Neanderthals. If that's true, it changes everything. It shows they didn't just hunt and survive, they thought, felt, and created. They ruled the European continent for over 300,000 years. They survived endless blizzards, hunted mammoths, crafted incredible tools, and cared for their own with empathy. But then, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished. The extinction of the Neanderthals remains one of humanity's greatest unsolved mysteries. There was no sudden catastrophe, no massive extermination. They simply disappeared. And to this day, archaeologists and scientists continue piecing together this prehistoric puzzle. There are several theories that attempt to explain this mysterious disappearance, and the truth may lie in a combination of them. Climate change. Europe's climate underwent dramatic shifts during this period. Harsh cold phases alternated with wetter, more unstable conditions, disrupting hunting patterns and altering habitats. Neanderthals, adapted to colder, more specific environments, may have struggled to cope with these rapid changes. Competition with Homo sapiens. When Homo sapiens arrived from Africa, they brought new survival strategies, larger social networks, more complex language, and more advanced technology. This edge may have led to silent competition over resources, shelter, and territory, and the Neanderthals gradually lost ground. Interbreeding. Another fascinating theory is that Neanderthals didn't vanish entirely, but were gradually absorbed through interbreeding with Homo sapiens. This would explain why their genetic traces still live on, in us suggesting that, rather than a definitive end, their story may have culminated in a slow and inevitable fusion. What if Neanderthals hadn't disappeared from history? How would they adapt to the modern world, and how long could they coexist alongside Homo sapiens? Now imagine if Neanderthals had survived as a parallel species similar to us, yet distinct. Could they find a place in our society? Despite their impressive abilities in tool-making and communication, natural selection favored Homo sapiens. In direct coexistence, Neanderthals might have struggled to compete. Had they not been assimilated, they could have ended up marginalized, treated as second-class citizens. In a more pessimistic scenario, they might have been enslaved, confined to reserves, or forced to live separately, regarded as an exotic curiosity rather than equals. More than tools or fossils, Neanderthals left us with an invisible but profound legacy. They showed us that humanity didn't begin from scratch, it was built layer by layer, with contributions from multiple human species over thousands of years. They left behind genes that still shape our bodies, our health, and even how we respond to the environment. They left lessons in resilience, compassion, and ingenuity. And perhaps most importantly, they left a message. Evolution isn't a straight line. It's a complex web of encounters, losses, and discoveries. To look at Neanderthals is to gaze into an ancestral mirror and realize that even after 40,000 years, we still carry a piece of them within each of us. The more we dig into the past, the more we realize that Neanderthals were anything but simple. Behind the outdated image of cave brutes lies a story full of mysteries, unexpected behaviors, and discoveries that still leave scientists in awe today. They left us clues, and every fossil, every stone mark, every bone fragment is like a coded message waiting to be deciphered. Neanderthal fossils are true time capsules. In them, scientists can detect injury marks, signs of disease, dietary habits, and even clues about how they died. Some fossils show healed fractures, proof that those individuals were cared for by others. Others have extremely worn teeth, possibly used as tools, suggesting their mouths doubled as a third hand. Even more surprising, preserved dental tartar has revealed traces of medicinal plants like moss and chamomile, hints of a rudimentary understanding of healing and natural remedies. In short, their skeletons don't just tell stories of survival, they speak of care, adaptation, and even early medicine. This is one of the most debated questions, and the answer might be, in some cases, yes. Fossils from sites like El Cedron in Spain show cut marks on human bones that resemble those made on hunted animals. Some skulls were even cracked open to access the brain, pointing to possible cannibalistic practices. But hold on, this doesn't mean it was a regular or ritualistic behavior. Most experts believe that Neanderthal cannibalism occurred in extreme situations such as severe famine or isolation, when survival demanded desperate measures. Rather than cruelty, it may have been a last resort in a world where staying alive was a relentless battle against death. Though no actual garments have survived, Neanderthals lived in freezing environments, so some form of protection was essential. It's highly likely they wore animal hides, perhaps fastened with leather strips or plant fibers. There's more. Archaeologists have found pigment fragments and perforated shells at Neanderthal sites, possible evidence of adornments, necklaces, or even body painting. This suggests they may have had a sense of identity, aesthetics, or even social status. And as for language, all signs point to communication far beyond mere grunts. The structure of their neck and skull bones indicates they were capable of producing a wide range of sounds. Combined with their developed brains and social living, it's likely they had a rudimentary spoken language made up of sounds, gestures, and facial expressions. They may not have spoken as we do, but they surely made themselves understood, which, after all, is the essence of any language. The Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago, but the echo of their existence still resonates within us, not just in our DNA, but in the questions we continue to ask, the discoveries that keep surprising us, and the almost instinctive curiosity we have to understand who we were in order to grasp who we are. They weren't a footnote in human history. They were protagonists of a wild and challenging era, and their journey still sheds light on the paths of our own past. We've learned that intelligence doesn't depend on Wi-Fi, and that empathy can exist without words. That 50,000 years ago, there were already humans who cared for the sick, buried their dead crafted tool sand, perhaps even told stories around the fire. We've learned that humanity is plural, shaped by different species that interbred, coexisted, and contributed to who we are today. And even without cities, books, or monuments, the Neanderthals left behind something greater, a legacy of resilience, adaptation, and humanity. The story of the Neanderthals is, above all, a lesson in resilience. They faced a hostile planet filled with invisible threats and natural catastrophes, yet they endured for hundreds of thousands of years. Their ability to adapt, to learn, to protect one another, and to keep going is what connects us to them. And perhaps it's that same strength that still drives us today, in a world that looks very different but continues to test our humanity. In the end, their story reminds us that survival has never been easy, and being human has always meant more than just existing. What's most fascinating is that the story of the Neanderthals is still being written. New discoveries emerge every year: fossils, tools, DNA fragments, cave pigments, tartar-coated teeth with hidden clues. Archaeology, genetics, and modern technology are continually opening doors to a past long buried beneath layers of ice, earth, and misconception. Each new excavation feels like unearthing a forgotten piece of our own origin. What else don't we know? How many more myths will we overturn? And what more do the Neanderthals still have to teach us? If the past has already amazed us this much, just imagine what's yet to come. The story of the Neanderthals wasn't written in ink, it was carved in stone, etched in bone, and hidden beneath the earth for millennia. Every new archaeological discovery is like turning a page, revealing astonishing details about a world once thought lost forever. What's most remarkable is that even after all this time, science continues to explore, test, and debate. The Neanderthals' past is still under construction, and scientists are its authors. Some excavations have completely transformed what we know about Neanderthals. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a skeleton was found buried with traces of pollen, suggesting a possible ritual involving flower shinting at symbolic and spiritual awareness. At El Sidron in Spain, researchers uncovered the remains of a family group bearing cut marks on human bones, raising theories of survival-driven cannibalism. In Denisova Cave, Siberia, the shock came from genetics. A bone fragment revealed a teenage girl born to a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, proving that human species intermingled far more than we once believed. And in La Pasiega, Spain, cave markings dated to over 60,000 years ago sparked a provocative question: did Neanderthals create art? The answer continues to divide experts to this day. Among the leading names in Neanderthal research is paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin, who led pivotal excavations and significantly advanced our understanding of their interactions with Homo sapiens. Another major figure is Svante Pääbo, awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2022, renowned for sequencing Neanderthal DNA for the first time, a breakthrough that turned archaeology into molecular science. Key studies published in Nature and Science are frequently cited for bridging archaeology, genetics, and anthropology, such as the confirmation that nearly all humans outside Africa carry Neanderthal genes, a revelation that shattered old theories of extinction and genetic purity. For those who want to see it all up close, the world offers many places where the past comes to life. The Neanderthal Museum in Mettmann, Germany, is located near the valley where the first Neanderthal fossil was discovered in 1856, the famous Neanderthal man. The National Prehistory Museum in Les Aizes, France, houses finds from a region rich in early European fossils and archaeological sites. Altamira, Spain, and Chauvet, France, feature stunning replicas of prehistoric caves with rock art, some possibly created by Neanderthals. These aren't just museums, they're open windows into a past that still pulses, waiting to be rediscovered by each new generation. The Neanderthals may have vanished, but they left a deep mark on our history and even in our DNA. They weren't brutes, but humans just like us, with culture, bonds, and intelligence. If you enjoyed this trip to the past, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next videos. There's still so much history for us to uncover together. See you next time.